And you're very welcome to the RTÉ Rugby Podcast. After a few weeks of a break, we're delighted to be back with you ahead of the Lions' first test against South Africa on Saturday. With me, Donal, Lenihan in Cape Town, and Bernard Jackman, well, to preview the first test. You're welcome, gentlemen. How are we?
Very good.
Good. Donal, you made it through security, quarantine, PCR tests, COVID vaccinations, and you're nicely positioned looking out at Table Mountain there. Sure, life is wonderful, huh?
Well, I have to say, no, Hugh, I'd love to spoil the viewers. Turn the camera around. I'm looking straight at Table Mountain. The fog has gone. I can actually see the cable cars going up the middle of it. I might even try and get up there this morning. But I have to say, I'm not here without huge sacrifices. On the plane yesterday, flew out through Dublin. It was actually, 18 months since I was on a flight, and you actually forget the procedures. But I have to say it was pretty seamless. Got the PCR test on Monday, got the result, everything good. Incredibly, the flight from Dublin to Frankfurt was fairly full, and I must say panicked a small bit. I had my mask on, sat down, but I was in a row next to two other people. So there was three of us, all big fellas, of course, stuck on top of each other and loads of free seats all over the place. So we were all kind of looking at each other. We weren't allowed to move, but in the end, I put up my hand as a good student and just told your one I was moving. So, of course, as the Irish soccer team found out a couple of months ago, once you change your seat for contact tracing, they have to put down the number. Got through all of that, got into Cape Town at 6 a.m. this morning. Lashing rain, of course, having left 28 degrees when I left Cork. But that said, this afternoon, the sun is shining. And, having got here, really looking forward to the opening test on Saturday.
Well, Donal, I don't know what you can see from where you are now, but you'd be delighted to learn that Bernard Jackman has upgraded his background to all the sports books that he claims to have read during his career, including your autobiography, Yannick. So that made the shortlist.
Well, I always knew he was learning, but somebody told me he's in Trinity as we speak. So a small bit of bluffing going on, I'd say.
There is. Bert, listen, the starting to build now. I don't know about you, the Lions tour. I think for many people, just given the nature of the pandemic, where we're at with so much going on, vaccinations, restrictions, the Lions tour has taken a bit of a backseat to this point. But it's from this point on, the test teams have been named. Saturday is the first test. That's when we can start to get excited, I think.
Yeah, and I wasn't really enjoying it at all until that Springbok A game, which was effectively a nearly full strength Springbok team, and the intensity and the quality in that game. I mean, just whetted my appetite for the real business, which starts Saturday. And I think Rassie and Gats, two experienced coaches, they're adding to it a little bit. Rassie tweeting back the Examiner and things like that. Just starting to build now, and obviously there's not going to be a crowd there, but I think the intensity and the occasion will still be absolutely massive. I mean, it's I'm excited about it now, and I can't wait to just see. Well, I think we know what the Boks are going to do. I think we know how they're going to play, but the team Gatland has picked, and I'm sure we're going to talk about it, makes you wonder. Is he going to be more flexible in terms of his strategy than he has in the past? And have they seen things that they obviously have seen things they think they can exploit, but can they exploit it?
I was glad that Rassie Erasmus took to Twitter to try and kind of jolt things down a little bit. I have to say, Warren Gatland is no stranger to a bit of silly buggers himself over the years, and I'm sure he more than enjoyed that. But given the context of what's been going on around South Africa, the violence on the streets, the looting, Jacob Zuma, and the protests that have kind of gathered over that, rugby has taken a back seat. So I think Rassie, from the little that we know of him during his time as Munster, almost felt like he had to take things into his own hands to kind of get this series back into the mindset of the South African people.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, look, I think I was working out. This is the 9th Lions series that I've been involved in or been at in one guise or another. And through all the other ones, in the build-up to the first test, by this stage of the tour, you would have ex-players from the local country giving out about something, questioning the validity of various areas of the Lions game. The pressure would be mounting from everywhere. But because, obviously, there's been no fans in the game, because there's so many other things going on in South Africa, the whole thing seems to have gone on under the radar, which is amazing. I was delighted that Rassie, obviously, he's still paying his subscription to the Irish Examiner when he picked up Getty's comments. But look, as you say, two men well versed in terms of stirring things. In fact, I was interested yesterday, Warren Gatland making a comment about, that the box were rattled because in that A match, the Lions weren't put out in any way by their physicality. I mean, talk about a red rag to a bull. I always remember talking to Lawrence Delalio a couple of years ago when Gaddy was the coach of Wasps and they'd begun up to play Leicester and Welford Road. This was Leicester of the Martin Johnson era, who were killing all and sundry before them. Yeah. And Gaddy would just throw a bombshell right into the middle of it. And Delalio would go, Jesus, what are you doing? Like, as if it wasn't bad enough going up there. So there's a little bit of that going on. But it's, look, it's great to see, because just like Bernard and yourself, I have found it difficult to kind of really get into the tour. I suppose we had other distractions at home. The Euros, the soccer was fantastic when it was on. We had the hurling championship and Gaelic football as well. But as Bernard said, that A match, you got a glimpse of what's coming down the road. I think what makes this opening test so difficult to call is there are so many uncertainties. I mean, in my experience, I have never seen a Lions test team going into a game with more advantages than the host team. It's normally the other way around. It's normally the Lions that are cramming their exams in terms of trying to get combinations together, trying to get used to each other. In this case, it's the other way around. Even simple things like the venue. The Lions have been here now in Cape Town for 2 weeks. They played in the magnificent new Cape Town Stadium. They don't play rugby in Newlands anymore, which was the traditional home of the Springboks and, of course, Western Province in Cape Town. So the Lions have been there. They've had a match. All 3 tests are now going to take place there. So it'll be like a home from home for the Lions, as opposed to other tours. They're different venues. You're going in and everything is stacked against you. They now don't have the issue of altitude to deal with at any stage during the tour. That's another key advantage for them. We know the South Africa are way behind where they would have been going into the final of the World Cup 18, 20 months ago. The question is, have the work that they've done in camp since they've come together, has that been sufficient to sort of bring them up to speed? Because so many of their players are either lacking in game time or are suffering the after effects of COVID. And we don't know, still athletes don't know how that is going to impact them in terms of, their physical performance. And the likes of Saya Kolisi, the captain, he was only cleared to go back training with the squad on Wednesday. Yeah. So there's huge variables going into this game, which makes it difficult to call in some respects.
Right. Well, there's a couple of interesting points that you've made there, and we'll get to them all. Just initially, Bernard, though, the Lions squad selection, the 23, the starting 15 and the match 23 to take on the Boks this weekend. Is it more or less what you expected, or has Gatland sprung a few surprises to what you thought he would pick?
Yeah, look, I think Ali Price is a surprise. For me, he was probably the third choice going out there. Now, having said that, I think he's been impressive. The question mark would be the quality of the opposition that he's impressed against. It's a big step up. Jack Conan, again, has been phenomenal. And every minute he's played, he's been really good. But my gut feeling was that Gatland would stay loyal to Faletau, who has been to war with him on so many occasions in a Lions and a Welsh jersey. And I understand his form hasn't been as good as Conan's, but I just thought when it came to the crunch for the first test, he would stay loyal to him. Elliot Daly doesn't have a huge amount of experience in 13 for sure. He's looked comfortable there. He's a good footballer. He's a left foot, but this is a different ball game, and I think there's going to be a huge amount of pressure on him. And 2 weeks ago, what I said, Josh Adams and Lewis Rees-Sammet, neither of them being the team. I probably would have been shocked by that. So yeah, there's a few changes. But look, Gatland he's close to this team, and I think Gregor Townsend would have an influence on it as well, from an attacking point of view. And you can hear on the ref cam and the ref mic a lot, tempo. And I'm sure that the Lions feel that an area of that they can have an advantage in is fitness. And you're only going to test that if you play fast and you move the ball. And as Donal said, there's some doubts now. In fairness, I thought that they physically looked unbelievably good in the A game, considering they'd been locked up for 10 days. But it's the after effect potentially of COVID. There's a couple of injuries, and there's a few doubts around, like the two Duplessis brothers. I thought they would have been in. One of them would have been in the back row, but obviously we don't know what's happened with them. So I think the best front rower on the bench. So there's a few different things in the box setup that would give you hope as well. But from a Lions point of view, yeah, they were the ones that kind of surprised me. Okay, and Donal, your reflections on the team then. Was Murray that big a surprise to you in the context of how he has been performing for the last 2 years? And, just as a measurement of a previous standard in Conor Murray, he probably hasn't been at that level. Was it a big surprise to you that he didn't start? And equally, were there other calls that you expected Gatland to make that he did not make?
Yeah, well, look, let's deal with the Conor Murray one first. Look, we've spoken about Conor's form ad nauseum on this podcast over the last year or so. To be fair to Conor, I think he had found his form in the Six Nations. He had a very good Six Nations. He started the opening game of the tour was against Japan. Himself and Dan Biggar performed superbly on that occasion, and you would have walked away from that game thinking, yeah, that's the test combination at halfback already. Later on that evening, when he was named as tour captain, when Alan Wynne-Jones had to cry off, well, you had to assume he was a certainty then for the test. I do think he didn't play well against South Africa but it isn't as if Gatland hasn't seen Conor Murray underperform in certain games before, but know that on the biggest stage that he has the experience to be able to produce. Ali Price, to be fair, I think if the Lions want to play at high tempo, and it's obvious that's what they want to do, they want to take the Springboks out of their comfort zone because of all the COVID issues. They want to force the pace of the game to get them to a point where they're going to be out on their feet. Ali Price has shown that, he's more of a distributor. He gets the ball away quickly. He's very good at lining up his runners and all that type of thing. But you've got to question the quality of the opposition that he performed against, number one. And secondly, in the games that he got, the Lions pack was so dominant up front, he was getting ball on a play. So look, I think that selection, Gatland wouldn't have envisaged that 3 weeks ago. So there has been a change, and a change in a number of areas. I have to say I was hugely surprised by the selection of the back three in particular. For me, given the quality of the Springboks kicking game, the aerial bombardment that's sure to come, Liam Williams is the most assured man under a high ball that I know. Not only that, but there's an aura about him. He is so confident under that high ball that brings confidence to everyone around you. I don't think Stuart Hogg or Van der Merwe are proven from that perspective. I mean, bear in mind it's only 3 weeks since Stuart Hogg was left out of the Exeter team for the semi-final and the final of the Premiership. So obviously Rob Baxter must have had certain question marks about his ability. So the composition of the back line, I have to say, surprised. Up front, I think by and large, he's selected on form. Jack Conan, for me, has been outstanding on the tour. Wynne-Jones gets the nod at loose head on the basis. Vunipola looked a bit off the pace scrummage-wise. And when you consider the likes of Jamie George, Vunipola, Owen Farrell, a year spent playing in the championship, the lower level of rugby in England, has come back to bite them, I think. I think Cowan Dickey is there on form. I feel a bit sorry for Tyke Byrne. I think he's had a brilliant tour, but I also think that Gatland has a specific role earmarked for Courtney Laws. If you remember, he was brought in as a sort of a last-ditch selection. They were only announcing 35 players. They picked 36. He was the one that they brought in. So overall, I've always respected Gatland. I think he's a very good selector. No, he's left me scratching my head at this stage. I always bow to the fact that they know what's going on in training, but I really think in certain areas here, he's put his head on the block because I think the Lions are in a great position to open the series with a win. But if they don't get it, where do you turn to then?
Birch, Gatland has unquestionably gambled here, and Donal mentioned the advantages that the Lions have had on this tour that they would not ordinarily have on a touring tour. But one of the advantages that they should have had, by virtue of the amount of games that they played versus South Africa, is that they would have had combinations in key areas that are more used to each other. Of the 5 key combinations in this starting Lions team, only Robbie Henshaw and Elliot Daly have started together before on this tour. Every other combination is a first-time pairing for the first test. Is that not very strange?
It's bizarre. It's bizarre. And you'll always have Lions coaches saying how important it is that they get enough games pre-first test to build those combinations. So it is really strange, and I don't know. And in fairness, there was another quote from Gatland saying that when they had the selection meeting, there was hardly any alignment across all the coaches in terms of the team to be picked. So it does seem like this has come together without any grand master plan. Now, we've seen it happen before where there's a team put together and they just click, and it's that. And firstly, Gatland has a strong sense of intuition and backing his gut as well, and he's been right more than he's wrong. But it does look like a lot of the warm-up games were a waste. In terms of the opposition not being strong enough to test them in areas that the box will, and then secondly, in terms of as you said, combinations. I think Rory O'Connor did a piece in the Independence Day, and it shows the lack of alignment or consistency in terms of building relationships. And Ali Price and Dan Bigger to play together for the first time in a test match when there hasn't been any injuries to make that happen is very strange. It's very strange, Don. Can you understand that?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Well, I think I go back to the selection point that Bernard made there. From what I gather, and I know Gatty did this for the squad selection, the wider squad selection first, and then he did it for the opening test where there's 4 coaches there. He asked all of them, okay, lads, you pick your starting team, pick the 8 fellas you'll have on the bench. We'll come in and we'll compare and we'll contrast. Of the combination, only 4 forwards and 3 backs were common to the 4 selections across. So it's a very diverse selection. So it does sort of smack that, that they weren't building, that there wasn't a plan, let's say, that you were building. You were looking, because you were going to play this way, we're playing this combination against the Stormers, in other words, against the Sharks, with the emphasis of building towards this test series. In some respects, as it's positive for the group in that it has related, or it has rewarded form, but that's up front. I mean, Josh Adams, he scored 8 tries. Apparently, his selection it came down. He 1 or 2 errors in the game against the Stormers. His wife, they'd had a first child 3 days beforehand. He was following that on Zoom. I mean, it's not surprising that I might have been a little bit off last Saturday. How you could make the selection or judge the selection on that, I find bizarre. It's the other one, Elliot Daly. I mean, fantastic player, no question about that. He hasn't started at outside centre since 2016 at international level. And the last one I'll make is there's a rumour out here in South Africa amongst the media people that I've met that Ian Henderson could well have been in. That was a 6-2 split early in the week. So that Henderson was going to be in there, and Farrell and Conor Murray on the bench. Then the box went for a 5-3 split for the reasons that Neil Armour outlined, because they're worried about Pollard. Pollard has played little or no rugby. So there's no way he's going to get 80 minutes. So they've put 3 backs on the bench. But are the Lions then reacting to that by going for the 5-3 split? Like I think had the box gone with a 6-2 split on the bench, the Lions would have done likewise. So therefore, I think the Lions should be in a position where they're more proactive in terms of what they want to do, as opposed to reacting to what the opposition are doing. But look, it's all conjecture. We'll just have to wait. That's why this game is so compelling for me, because there's so many things, so many uncertainties out there. Until you actually get to see what combinations are there and how they perform under pressure, it's very difficult to really predict the outcome.
Just Hugh, sorry, I think this selection is a selection I would have predicted if you had lost the first test. I think we expected a kind of a boring conservative selection for the first test, because I look back at Wales, South Africa in the World Cup semi-final. I know it's a while ago, but it gave an insight into what Gatland sees in the Springboks game and what the Springboks saw in Gatland's game, and it was unbelievably tight. It was the hardest match the Boks got after round 1, when the New Zealanders beat them, and I would have thought Gatland would have said, right, I was on the money in terms of the game plan. Throw in a few more match winners, you know, the likes of Owen Farrell, throw in a bit more power, likes of Courtney Laws, Tyke Furlong. We have the tools to beat them. And for whatever reason, and I agree with Donal, I think the Saracens guys, Baratoje, have definitely struggled, and that's obviously changed things around. Connor maybe isn't in the form that Gatland hoped he would be in, but it's for me it's a gamble, but it's going to be fascinating.
It is
fascinating.
Yeah,
but it's on that point. Sorry, Hugh. You and I were at that game, if you remember. We did that semi-final, Wales and South Africa. We were staying in the same hotel as Wales, so I used to meet Gatland, chatting away to him. They had a couple of injuries going into that game. But for a kick, I think there was 3 points in it up to a couple of minutes to go. Yeah. I think Pollard might have got a drop goal or a penalty. I think that was the day that Gatland decided he would do the Lions again. After New Zealand, he said he'd never do the Lions anymore. The pressure he was under, the fallout, the media, he expected to be treated with more respect from the New Zealanders, being a New Zealander himself when he went out there. And there was aspects of the last Lions tour that he hated. And, you know, he seriously considered not doing the Lions ever again. I think that semi-final, at the back of his mind, planted a seed for the reasons that Bernard has outlined, that this South African side were very beatable. Now, as we know, so much water has gone under the bridge since then. But I think it's a fair point, because Wales, even though they had a number of injuries going into that semi-final, they almost got over the line. And, you know, I think they had more injuries after that. I think had they beaten South Africa, England would probably have blown Wales away in the final. But I've no doubt that game was a big influencer in Gatland's decision to do this tour.
Just, you mentioned the back three, and Bernard, this is something that I've been thinking about. You did a piece on your Twitter feed today about elements of the Springbok game that is going to be very hard for the Lions to counteract, one of which was the kicking game, in particular of Faf de Klerk. And I think the statistic from the South Africa A game, the last one he played, was that he himself kicked the ball 40% of the time, or somewhere thereabouts. So the kicks from the Springboks, 40% of the time came from their scrum half, left-footed, and what he managed to do to put pressure on the Lions at the time. And I'm looking at that back three of Watson, Hogg, and Van der Merwe. And as Donal mentioned, it's very difficult, if this is a reactive Lions selection from Gatland into what he's expected to face, it's very, very difficult, you know, to ascertain the sense of picking Hogg and Van der Merwe for what South Africa we know will do under the high ball, which is kick and kick and kick and kick, given those two are not necessarily that strong under high balls.
It's absolute, like, I think Rassie and Jackman and Felix Jones will be, you know, licking their lips at the idea of getting after those in the air. And that's what, like, Dan Bigger spoke this week about kind of that semi-final again, and how at key moments they just lost patience, right? So some of us losing patience and someone's making errors. But if you make an error outside your own 22, that's when the box, that's when they light up, and that's when they go to that power game. But they make very few errors in that kick tennis battle. And again, I think it's all well and good saying, oh, we're going to set the team up for counter-attack. But when you know that the primary source of possession you're going to have is contestables from Faf de Klerk, which are generally very accurate. You know, Anthony Watson or Duhan van der Merwe, they're not going to get a chance to catch that with space and time and to run back. It's literally, it's a challenge in the air. And so look, hopefully they step up to the mark, because if you start knocking those balls on in the air, if they regather them, then it's very, very difficult. And they only kick long to you, you know, when they've actually punched holes and they can find grass. They very rarely kick long where you catch it back on the halfway line and can go back at them. So it is a big gamble, but maybe he thinks that, I'm sure they think that there'll be one opportunity to get them on transition or counterattack, and this is the team to do it. But you would have to sense, like, I think Duhan van der Merwe, I mean, like, obviously being from South Africa, he is in for some amount of pressure, you know what I mean? Yeah. Physical, verbal, being targeted in the air, and you know, hopefully he steps up to it, because it could have a key outcome on the game. Absolutely.
The back row battle, Donal, is going to be very interesting for the Boks. You have Khaleesi coming back from COVID, as you just mentioned, just cleared to rejoin training. We don't know what toll that's going to take from him. Peter Steph du Toit, who's one of the best flankers in the world now, and certainly one of the most experienced and clever. And then you have Kagaga Swift at the back for South Africa, who's got the nod ahead of Vermeulen, who obviously we know what the damage he did in the World Cup. And then you have Courtney Laws at 6, Tom Curry at 7, and Jack Conan. And what a selection it is for Jack Conan, Donal, who was so shocked to even make the Lions squad in the first place. He's now just starting test number 8.
Yeah, I think to be fair to Jack Conan, you go back, he'd missed so much rugby since the last World Cup, really. Got in against England, was part of that, remember that set piece play that got a try for Keith Earls, then he scored a try himself. I thought he took his opportunity every time he went out. You go back when Leinster beat Exeter Chiefs in Sandy Park, he completely outplayed Sam Simmons that day. Everybody was talking about Sam Simmons for the Lions. No question in my mind after that day that he put himself into the frame to be picked. Now, once he had then got selection, he played against Japan, made a big impact that day. And that's all you can do. On a Lions tour, you might get 2 chances. You have to perform. And then the other key element is consistency, because you're training every day. And that's where the likes of Gatland and the coaches, while they know the opposition players, when I say opposition, they'll know the Irish players, the Scots and the rest from preparing to play against them. You really only get to know the ins and outs of the player when you work with them on the field and you get the opportunity of sitting down with them afterwards. And I think Jack Conan has done everything right. And I think on form, he deserves to be there. Courtney Laws is the interesting one in that, as I say, he hasn't played him over the last couple of weekends. And it looked as if he always had it on his mind that he was going to play him 6. Likewise, I think he sees Tyke Byrne as like for like there. So either Laws goes, like the one decision the Lions have to make, there's no way Alan Wynne-Jones can play 80 minutes. So he's going to be gone after, say, 40, 50. Does Laws go into the second row then and Tyke Byrne comes in? I would imagine that's what's going to happen. But I think when he had that in mind originally, it was probably a 6-2 split. So you could have had Ian Henderson on the bench as well. So that changes that dynamic. The interesting thing for me, when you look at the pack that South Africa have selected, it's the exact same 8 that started for the A team. So Quagga Smith was at 8 that day. The front row, as Bernard said, I've never been a big fan of Trevor Nkane. I think he's an average scrummager. So I think psychologically, you go back to, I was at the opening test in Durban 12 years ago, the day that Phil Vickery got absolutely destroyed by the beast. Yeah. And the Lions, the Springboks set their template, and the opening 3 scrums of that game, that set the platform for the match, and the Springboks won at a canter. Lions came back, got a few tries at the end, but that put a bit of glass, and it actually helped them in terms of their belief for the second test. But I think, again, I agree with Bernard. They have their better front row on the bench. But surely the time to inflict the psychological damage is from the start. I mean, if the Lions start well and they're in the game, you know, giving away a scrum penalty or 2 after 50, 60 minutes doesn't have the same impact as it does at the start of the game. So it's interesting. Like, both coaches are sort of playing fire with fire, looking to hold something back. The Springboks, I'd say, are worried that physically they know they're going to wilt, and maybe they want their better front 5 forwards to come on at that stage. Like, Lou Diaga is on the bench. He would have started in the World Cup final, but I don't think he's played a match since last March. He missed the whole of Sale Sharks at the end of the season. So again, look, we know they're great players, but it's going to be fascinating, that battle up front.
And on the battle up front, Birch, Luke Cowan-Dickie, are you surprised that he got selected ahead of Ken Owens, your position at hooker? I just would have thought Ken Owens, experience-wise, technique-wise, particularly at lineout, would have been a little bit ahead of Cowan-Dickie.
Yeah, but his form has just dropped off at the wrong time. Cowan-Dickie is in top of his form. He's been outstanding. So, you know, I think he's definitely merits his place. Now, he's a little bit smaller than Ken Owens, but I think given how he's scrummaged for Exeter, I think he's technically a very good scrummager. And obviously pre-tour we would have thought Ken Owens was going to be one of Gatland's favourites, but I think Cowan-Dickie's form has been so good that he deserves a shot. Okay, just your prediction, gentlemen, then, if you don't mind. It's a fascinating one. I look, and nobody seems to be able to call this one, and least of all some of the selection choices. What's your view, by the way, on Rassie Erasmus, Birch, patrolling the sidelines as the water boy? Do you think that's a psychological
kind of again messing around. This player seems to react to him. He seems to really enjoy it. I think Gatland has a bit of an issue with it. What's your own view on it?
No, I think it's to see it and understand it, you have to think of the history. So Jacques Nienaber was a physio for Rassie Erasmus back at the Cheetahs. Rassie Erasmus trained him to be a defense coach so he could manipulate the rules of being a physio on the field. So even when we watched Munster, and Donal would have seen lots of times, I mean, if Munster were stuck on their own goal line, Jacques Nienaber was behind him in the dead ball area, telling fellas where to go, etc. It's unbelievable, able to tell them how to defend from scrums. But obviously Jacques now is the head coach, so they needed to flip that. And Rassie's basically making sure that the message being transferred from above Felix, Jack, etc. to the players is spot on. But the beauty of it is, if he doesn't agree with the message, he can actually change it. Because in fairness, they're very much aligned, and I think that's why getting Felix in pre-World Cup was really huge for them, because he didn't want to have any change. He wanted a coaching team who understood what he liked and trusted. So it's just another look. It's very unusual. In France, the coaches are on the sideline. In rugby, we're used to the coaches being up in the coaching box with a laptop. I just think it's so you can see the glint in Rassie's eyes, though. I mean, you know, he had bad health apparently for a little while, and it's just so I find it fascinating. I think he's a great character, a great rugby man, and I think the little bits of conflict and bickering between himself and Gatland are interesting, to be honest, because it's done it's not disrespectful, you know. It's done in a decent way so far, and hopefully that continues. So I don't mind it, but just Rassie Erasmus, when he coached the Cheetahs, went onto the roof of the stadium with a colour code system, and when there was a scrum or line out, the scrum half would look up, he would flash certain colours, and that meant what the call was. So he's always been a coach who's been hands-on dictatorship. This is what you do in this situation. So he's only following on in that. He's not changing. And people don't believe. I'll send you a photograph later. I'll tweet it of him actually up in the box with this DJ system. It's traffic lights. It's unbelievable. So like it's not new. He's always been hands-on, telling players what to do.
Yeah, and the players seem to respond to that as well. You know, Gatland doesn't do that, Donal, but that's different styles. That's why we love the game, isn't it?
Absolutely, and I suppose just to follow up on that, when Birch was talking about Nienaber and Munster, if you remember, it used to drive Gregor Townsend ballistic with the Glasgow Warriors, and as it happened, they met each other in the Heineken Cup, and in advance of the game in Scotstoun, Townsend put in a complaint to the Heineken Cup authorities, so much so that Nienaber had to go away, get his certificate as a physio, and he brought it to the match with him so that he was cleared to be on the sideline. So isn't it ironic how a couple of years down the road, have Townsend in the Lions coaching box, Nienaber the head coach now? I mean, when you think about it, Rassie is supposed to be having a back seat. He is now the David Nucifora of Springbok rugby. But as Birch said, you could see he was jumping out of his skin. He was basically there because Nienaber had COVID, so he had to take over the running of the team for the Georgia match and the South Africa A game. But he was down there, and he got so enthralled, he forgot to bring the water bottle on. Of course, Gatland was only thrilled when he spotted this, but it was quite funny when they played, South Africa A played the Blue Bulls here in Cape Town as well last Saturday. And Erasmus repeated the dose, but every time he ran on, he held the bottle up like this while he was running on, giving the instructions with the bottle up in the air. No, to be handy if he gave somebody something to drink out the odd time as well. But look, it only adds to the intrigue, really.
It's probably empty. The water bottle is probably empty. He just had it up on the side of his head. Look, lads, it's going to be a fascinating test. We're going to review it all next week. But I'm going to ask you. I'll start off. I think South Africa are going to win this one, and Gatland will just wipe all the systems out and pick his tried and trusted for next week and revert back to what we thought would be a start 15 for this section. Birch, what do you think? South Africa or Lions to win?
South Africa for me.
South Africa for me, and South Africa for you, Donal?
I'm torn. I'm kind of leaning towards the Lions for all the advantages. Well, I put it this way. I definitely was up to the team selection. I thought they had all the advantages. And the Lions, the first test is so important, because if you win the first test, you're in the fight right up to the last minute of the last game on tour. So it's hugely important. But that selection has kind of flipped me back again now towards maybe the Springboks. But look, I think there's nothing in it. I tell you what I'm going to do, Hugh. As you know, our long tradition on tour, when we're away doing commentaries together, we go out on the Thursday night, we go to the pictures. I go out and I try and get my pick and mix, but I only arrived in South Africa today, so I was only able to get jellies. They had no fudge or anything.
And
so,
let me tell you, listeners, the sight of Donal Lenihan walking up at 6'4" and his big moustache and a pair of Wranglers that just barely come down the ankles, asking for pick and mix to the guy behind the sweet shop in the cinema is one of the sights that I will never forget as long as I live. Right, okay, so listen, enjoy, Donal, enjoy the next few days and indeed the match as well, and we'll pick this up next week ahead of the second test. But thanks to Bernard and to Donal and to Mikey who produced. Talk to you next week.